Why people lose interest in you. Psychology of emotional detachment. Have you ever felt confused when someone who once seemed interested suddenly becomes distant, quieter, or emotionally unavailable? They reply less, initiate less, and slowly pull away, leaving you wondering what changed and what you might have done wrong. This experience is emotionally painful, but psychology shows that losing interest is rarely about one single action or moment. It is usually the result of deeper psychological patterns related to emotions, attachment, expectations, and internal conflict. In this video, we will explore why people lose interest, what emotional detachment really means, and how the human mind slowly disconnects without always being aware of it. One of the main psychological reasons people lose interest is emotional saturation. In the beginning of a connection, the brain releases dopamine, the chemical associated with excitement, curiosity, and motivation. Everything feels new, engaging, and emotionally stimulating. Over time, if emotional intensity is not balanced, the brain adapts. What once felt exciting becomes familiar. This does not mean the connection is bad, but the brain naturally reduces dopamine when novelty decreases. Some people interpret this emotional shift as boredom or loss of interest, even though it is simply the brain adjusting to familiarity. Another powerful factor is emotional overwhelm. When someone feels emotionally pressured, expected to respond constantly, or responsible for another person's emotional state, the brain may associate the connection with stress. Instead of a comfort, the relationship begins to feel demanding. Psychologically, the brain seeks relief from emotional overload, and distance becomes a coping mechanism. Pulling away is not always intentional. It is often the mind protecting itself from feeling overwhelmed. Attachment styles also play a major role in emotional detachment. People with avoidant attachment styles feel uncomfortable with emotional closeness. When intimacy increases, their brain interprets it as a threat to independence. As a result, they subconsciously create distance to regain a sense of control. This withdrawal is not about a lack of care, but about fear of emotional dependency. On the other hand, anxious attachment styles may respond to distance by seeking reassurance, which can unintentionally increase pressure and accelerate detachment. Loss of interest can also come from unmet expectations. When people form an image of how a connection should feel, behave, or progress, disappointment arises if reality does not match those expectations. The brain compares expectations with experience, and when there is a mismatch, emotional engagement decreases. This does not always mean the other person did something wrong. It often reflects internal expectations that were never clearly communicated. Emotional detachment is also linked to internal stress. When someone is dealing with personal challenges, anxiety, work pressure, or emotional exhaustion, their mental energy becomes limited. The brain prioritizes survival and problem solving over emotional connection. As a result, interest in social or emotional engagement decreases. This withdrawal is about capacity, not value. People often pull away because they do not have the emotional resources to connect, not because the connection is unimportant. Another psychological reason people lose interest is the desire for control. Emotional closeness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability involves uncertainty. Some individuals feel safer when they control emotional distance. By pulling away, they reduce the risk of being hurt, rejected, or dependent. Silence and distance become tools the brain uses to restore a sense of power and emotional balance. Over time, repeated emotional patterns also influence interest. If interactions become predictable, overly intense, or emotionally repetitive, the brain stops feeling stimulated. Humans crave emotional variation and growth. When conversations feel stuck in the same emotional space, the mind disengages. This does not mean excitement must be constant, but emotional depth must evolve. It is important to understand that losing interest does not always mean a lack of care or respect. Often, it reflects internal psychological processes happening beneath awareness. People do not always consciously decide to detach. Their emotions shift first, and behavior follows later. This is why explanations are often unclear or absent. The brain struggles to explain emotional changes logically. From a psychological perspective, self-worth should never be measured by someone else's level of interest. Emotional detachment says more about the other person's internal state, emotional capacity, and attachment patterns than it does about your value. When people internalize detachment as personal failure, it increases self-doubt and emotional pain. Understanding this psychology allows you to respond differently. Instead of chasing clarity or forcing connection, awareness helps you maintain emotional balance. Healthy connection is built on mutual emotional availability, not pressure or fear. When interest fades, the most powerful response is self-respect, emotional stability, and clarity about your own needs. Psychology teaches us that not every connection is meant to last, but every experience teaches something valuable about boundaries, attachment, and emotional awareness. When you understand why people lose interest, you stop blaming yourself and start observing patterns with maturity and insight. If this video helped you understand emotional detachment and the psychology behind losing interest, take a moment to reflect on your past experiences with curiosity rather than judgment. Awareness transforms pain into understanding. If you found this video helpful, like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may be struggling with emotional confusion right now. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced emotional detachment and what psychology topic you want to explore next.